Okay, so here's a quick little Mortar matchup guide against a lot of beatdown decks that are pretty common in this meta. It's a pretty good deck. I made it to around 475 right now is where I'm sitting at with this deck. So it's a pretty solid deck. Depending on how this video does, I'll make a more comprehensive Mortar guide, but I thought it'd be kind of fun just to go over some of the beatdown matchups that are in the meta and kind of show how I like to beat these decks. So let's get into it. Okay, so to start us off, what happens if you're just relaxing and they play a Lavahound? You're going to want to play your Mortar in the same lane as the Lavahound, and you're also going to want to push the other side. The reason why you're going in the same lane is because it's a lot easier to get damage in the same lane as the Lavahound, because they tend not to have a lot of ground troops. And you want to push the opposite lane so they don't get a ton of elixir and can build up a push. Now, a really common mistake I see people making is they try to kill the Lavahound right away. And the reality is, the Lavahound isn't actually that dangerous until it bursts. So you're allowed to go and try to get some damage, and don't worry about getting the Lavahound down right away. It's more so what's behind the Lavahound that's scary, and that you need to worry about. So here's another example of me defending against Lavahound. Okay, so I'll take out the Tombstone, try to get rid of that right away. And the first thing I'm going to be focusing on is trying to get the Mortar in the same lane as the Lavahound. And I'm playing my Little Prince kind of in the middle to the right, away from any of his troops behind the Lavahound, so that it stays alive as long as possible. And I'm just going to keep on kiting with behind the Lavahound and trying to keep my Little Prince alive, or Musketeer if you're using a different version of this deck. But the whole point is you want to keep them alive as long as you can. Save your Fireball until you have to use it and get value. Maybe you can get the Skeleton Drags and the Lava Pops. And you just kind of want to kite everything away. Now, one thing you do really need to pay attention to when you're going to use your Fireball against Lavahound is make sure that, one, they don't have their Evolved Barbarians in cycle, or if they do, you have a counter to them. And two is just try to make sure that you can get some value, whether it's with the Skeleton Dragons, his Balloon, Flying Machines, whatever. It sucks when you use your Fireball and then they just spam a Balloon and Evolved Barbarians. It's honestly devastating, so you just have to be aware of that. Next, we have my absolute least favorite deck, which is going to be Sparky Goblin Giant. The most important thing when you're playing against this deck is you have to get a defensive Mortar down, and it needs to be in the middle properly. This is because your Mortar is going to shoot and hopefully take out some of the HP of the Sparky, which makes it easier to Fireball or log, but it also pulls the Goblin Giant, and if you don't, he's going to absolutely dummy your tower when they drop that Rage and just destroy everything. Now, it's super important that after you take out their push, you make a counter push, but you don't overcommit. A great example of this would be using your Spear Goblins with your Skeleton Barrel. They often don't want to use their spell until the barrel pops, so you can get some really good chip damage using your Skeleton Barrel and your Spear Goblins. And depending on what they have following that, you can follow up with a Mortar, or you can follow up with your Little Prince, but you do have to be aware of what they have and make sure you don't overcommit. So here's just another example of how important your defensive Mortar is when you're defending here. You'll see that my defensive Mortar, along with my Skeleton Barrel, does take out a ton of damage of the Sparky. And if it was full HP, I honestly would have been in a bit of trouble. It would have got a ton of value. And also the Goblin Giant wasn't able to go straight for my tower like a cocaine-crazed addict. So you do have to just make sure you keep that defensive Mortar down. You're never being too aggressive, and you're just always ready for him to go really aggressive. And then you'll see here, as soon as I'm done defending, I go for the counter push. And so I would say the main takeaway from this is be ready to play defense first against Goblin Giant, and then do a counter push. You don't always want to be the person who's making the first move or going for the first attack or being aggressive first. You want to defend first and then go for your push. And it's just a lot safer, and it's the best way to control the game. Up next we have Golem, and it's really simple. If you see them pump and you have elixir, you need to Fireball their pump, because they're going to build up some insane and unholy push if you don't hit their elixir ban. So here you'll see an example of how to defend against Golem. Now, you don't always have to have a defensive Mortar. It does help a lot, but if you get caught and you don't have a defensive Mortar, you just need to remember that your Little Prince or Musketeer, depending on the deck you're using, is out of range of their Tornado with your other cards. Now, their E-Dragon is going to almost make or break their push every single time when you're playing Mortarbait. Their E-Dragon will rip through your Goblins, your Goblin gang, and it sucks. So you need to make sure that you have your Little Prince, usually in the middle or in the very back left, and then you're using a card like the Knight to go up high and pull the E-Dragon and distract it. And then you need to be ready for them to use their Tornado before you stack up your cards. You don't want to play everything at once and just give them a ton of Tornado value. It's hard not to do that, but you just need to be patient and be ready to play your cards as needed. And then, of course, you'll see here, I counter push as soon as I'm done defending. And now for our last one, it's going to be defending EGiant. Now the reality is, EGiant is really expensive for them to make a push, and it's honestly really easy to defend. You just have to watch out for their Tornado and spread your troops out like this. Now all you have to do is you can play your mortar up against the river just like I did, one to the right, and then what you'll do is the EGiant will pull because he'll go almost anywhere and follow almost anything, and you'll get a shot on the tower, and then you just play your little prince out of range of the lightning, so you play him really far low, and then you can wait for him to tornado, and that's when you play your goblin gang and the rest of your cards to help take him down. So I am genuinely curious, if you made it this far watching this video, leave a comment on the video, and I'll put it at the end of my next video, but I'm just genuinely curious to see how far people have watched. I really appreciate you for watching this, whoever you are. Depending on how this video does, I might make a more comprehensive mortar guide, but I do hope these tips kind of help at least when you're playing against some of these beatdown type decks. Thank you.